All right. Welcome to Underground Catholicism. You guys know my name is Yasi. I have the pleasure of having Wesley Chambers on with us tonight. And we have a special show with a special guest. This is his first time here. He's been on before. If you seen him with Erick Ybarra, and was it with Alan?
Yeah,
Alan Rule? Alan
it's
Rule.
been a while, but yeah.
Yeah. I just posted the show here on a WhatsApp with William, and I think he's about to go live too. So I feel sorry for you, Wesley. I'm sorry.
It's
Bad
all good.
timing. Yeah.
It's all good. I'm not going to be able to compete with William, understandably. So
Yeah, neither am I. So
yeah.
but we got some folks here, and they'll trickle in little by little. So today, before we start, we're gonna talk about Ubi Petrus and his arguments on the papacy, specifically on the debate between Erick Ybarra and Ubi Petrus. And so we're going to be dealing with those arguments that Ubi had. But before we start, I do want to give Wesley a platform to talk about a little bit about himself. So if you want to share who you are, your background, as much as you want to share, brother.
Yeah, awesome. I will. Thank you for having me on. It's really cool. I've watched your show quite a bit the last couple of years, just off and on. So it's really nice to be going live on the real deal. Wesley Chambers, married to my wife Jess. We became Catholic in 2018. We were Protestants. My dad's a pastor. I was kind of raised kind of in the Protestant church, Southern Baptist specifically. Became evangelical, um, kind of confessional Protestant around early 20s, and then ended up finding my way to the Catholic Church. I'll show you a link a little bit later with a little bit more of my story if anyone's interested. But yeah, I live in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm a software developer. I'm a former philosopher, PhD dropout, and then I just started writing code and never looked back. So I work from home here, and I've tried to engage some of these topics in writing. I tell Elijah that I'm trying to. Everybody's doing YouTube and Twitter and all this stuff, and I want to make writing great again. So that's why I spend so much time on Substack. So I don't know how much more you want me to share. I kind of got into these debates just as some background a couple of years ago when some friends of mine at my parish, I go to a Latin Rite parish here in St. Louis, Missouri. Some friends of mine shared a book with me by Michael Welton that was kind of being used by some Eastern Orthodox apologists to make them maybe second guess or question their Catholic faith and convert to Eastern Orthodoxy. And that's the book. I started reading it and I was like, okay, I actually think this is a really bad book. And I'm concerned that my Catholic peers are reading this and feeling a pull. And I think that kind of reveals that there's not only just a lot of disaffect going on with Catholics, but there's maybe like a knowledge gap with Catholics where we don't know enough of our own tradition. And so we're not able to tell the counterfeit from the real. So that's kind of what got me into some of these debates. And I've kind of been hooked ever since, just kind of doing a lot of reading on the side as much as I can, and some writing a good bit on some of the Eastern Orthodox stuff. The stuff we're going to talk about tonight specifically was just some review notes that I wrote up for my Substack on the debate between Ubi Petrus and Erick Ybarra. I know that happened, in December, but life's busy. I try to write things when I can. I'm kind of a perfectionist, and I write really slowly. I edit really slowly. And so I published that recently, and some people shared it and thought it was worth reading. And here we are on the show to talk about it. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions to clarify or to get any more information of my background. I'm an open book, but that's the high level overview of myself.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, brother. How long have you been writing for?
On the Substack, let's see.
Yeah.
We started in January 2024 on this one, and it's actually a friend of mine, Jake Tate. He's a good buddy of mine. He's Catholic. He lives in Northern Virginia.
Okay.
And we actually work together at the same company. He's a software developer, DevOps engineer, and so we started the Substack, and yeah, we I don't know. I can go through with the introduction to our Substack in a minute, but we've been trying to co-author some things and contribute our own takes on various topics.
Sweet. And what specifically, you touched up on it a little bit. What got you interested specifically on Eastern Orthodoxy?
Yeah, it was so I was as a former philosophy student. I love arguments. I love writing. I love trying to write something really well, to craft a really good argument, or to um, understand somebody else's argument and be able to articulate it and summarize it, um, appraise it of its strengths and weaknesses. So I kind of like that kind of stuff in general, specifically on the Eastern Orthodox. So that drew me into apologetics, that kind of
Right.
way of thinking, and specifically Eastern Orthodox apologetics was really. Um, I have known Eric for a while, so I kind of had seen his stuff, but I wasn't really engaged too much until that Michael Welton book started circulating amongst some of my friends. I think that's really what got me looking specifically at the Eastern Orthodox stuff. I I've had a very high level view of a lot of different things and hadn't done too deeply, but I was able to tell from the book that it wasn't the objections were not very good, um, and then that just kind of got me digging and reading a lot more on my own that I've done since then. That was probably maybe maybe 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago now.
Sweet, sweet.
Yeah,
I'm excited because I've read your stuff. I've read your Substack, especially the last, what is it? The last three were in relation to this show. I know you had a part one, part two, and then
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
like a sweet. So,
yeah.
uh, and tell us as to why you felt the need to write on the debate between Erick versus Ubi. I know you mentioned you're a slow writer because that debate came out a few months ago,
Yeah.
and here you are. So
Yeah.
why did you pick that debate to write on? What is it about the significance of it and all that stuff?
Yeah, a couple of reasons. One is it's a good way to if I'm wanting to orient more of our apologetic effort towards writing, this is a good thing to use for writing. So there's that. Um, in addition to that, I would say a lot of things came up in the debate that I've heard recycled or repeated, or I've read reading different articles by Ubi Petrus, some things that he's written. And I felt like there weren't people can maybe pointing out the things that I wanted to point out in the way that I thought they should be or could be. There's been a lot of good reviews, like you and Eric have done one, and then you, Eric, and William, and another guy did one, and there's a lot of good stuff that comes up um, in those debate reviews. But I felt like I had a couple of things that I wanted to put down in writing that I didn't think were getting the attention that they deserve, maybe in the way that I would want to give them attention. So, uh, and I'll explain more when I get to those objections what I have in mind. So, yeah, just general apologetics effort. This is a good thing to use writing and apologetics for, and also. I felt like there was a couple things that I could speak to or that I wanted to speak to that others maybe hadn't spoken to enough or in the way that I thought was appropriate.
Awesome. Well, you want to get started? Should I bring up the Substack?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
See, I got mine up here.
Sweet. All right. So this is a Substack that Wesley Chambers writes his blogs. I guess that's the new thing that people use is Substack, right? Or because they used to be blog posts or whatever.
Yeah, it's pretty common.
And so he wrote these articles. There's a part one and a part two. And so we're gonna go through part one, and God willing, if we have time, we can go to part two. If not, we can always do another show on part two. Um, like I told you before, your platform is my platform. You're welcome anytime
Yeah,
on my channel to present this and future blogs. So we're gonna make writing known and great. So you're gonna
there we
write the
go.
stuff. You're gonna come on, and we're gonna make you more and more known. So not that I have a
Nice.
big channel, but we'll spread it as much as we can. So, all right. So the floor is yours, brother. So go ahead.
Sweet. Well, thanks again. I'm going to start with a couple kind of introductory things just to kind of explain. I will pitch Substack. All my stuff is free. Me and Jake, it's a free subscription. Um, totally cool with people who charge money for theirs, but we're blessed with jobs, and so we don't need to make a living off of this stuff. So if you want to subscribe, it's totally free. We don't charge anything. That's the same thing for Controversium, which is this Substack you're looking at right now, as well as my personal Substack, which is oh wait, I think I'm sharing just one screen. or one tab?
Oh, are you able to scroll down or no?
Yeah, I can scroll down on this tab, but I can't.
So should I go back to the way like this?
Click. No, I clicked a different tab for a different my
Oh, okay.
personal Substack. I wonder if I can. So there's a second present block there. Maybe I can. Sorry about this.
Oh, you're good, man. There's only 138 people watching, so just kidding.
Hey, that's a lot to me. So well, we'll reshare in just a second. But so I've got two Substacks, a personal one. Jake and I recreated what's cool about Substack is you can create one, and then you can. I created a special Gmail account specifically for controversium.substack. And what that allows me to do is to have my separate Substack over here with my account, and I can personally author things and have admin rights here. But but anybody else, guest authors who have their Substack account, they can also, if I invite them and I approve whatever they want to write, they can also publish at this Substack, and it's not my personal one. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it. You can design it, customize it. It's a great free resource. I think they take a cut if people are paying to subscribe. So check it out. It's really cool. If you want to get into writing and if you want to make writing great again, as I say, I think Substack is a great way to go. That being said, I am going to stop sharing, pull up my personal one. I didn't realize it wouldn't allow me to share a separate tab. And then I'm going to
let me know when you're ready. No worries.
Then I'll bring it back to the other one.
No, you're good, brother. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll bring it back up.
I see window. Okay. Oh, I see. Yeah, my browser settings would have to be reset. I'm going to go ahead and share this one, and then when I switch back, there you go. So briefly, we won't spend a lot of time here. This is my personal Substack. If you're interested, I wrote a brief account of my conversion, and I try to have good art, good quotations at the start if I can. So feel free to check that out. That's wesleychambers.substack.com if you're interested to read a little bit of my background from a very high level. The second thing here that we probably don't have time to get into tonight, but if you're interested, again, there's a girl named Mary who was emailing me a lot of questions about Eastern Orthodoxy and objections, especially from a lot of online works. Thank you. I saw that comment very briefly. Kyle, I believe. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Thank you. And so this is letters from an inquirer. Usually what I'll try to do is if I have a series of things, I'll put a tab up top of my Substack, and you can just click that and it'll have access to every post in the series. So check out those questions. Those are questions that she had and objections. I have a couple of more in this series to publish when I get around to it. But yeah, that's the personal Substack. Check it out if you're interested. I'm going to stop sharing and then pull up the other one. Sorry for the detour.
No, you're good. And question, so I was looking at that earlier today, the letters. So is that a real conversation, or is that like a made up? Oh, it's real.
No, that's a real conversation. Yeah. I mean, I've edited some of the responses and some of her questions, but yeah, that was a real email thread that was going on. And this was a girl, I think she was born Catholic, and she ended up kind of falling away and then became Protestant, and then is now back in the Catholic Church. And so what was cool was that, I write stuff and you're just like, is anybody going to read this? I don't really care. If I feel like I want to write something and say something, I'll do my best, send it out in the ether. And if God wants to use it, great. Otherwise, not a big deal. But this was someone who I did hear back from that said that I helped her come back to the faith. And so that was really encouraging and special to me, just to see that the efforts that you make, whether on YouTube or in writing or just in maybe personal life, can have an effect.
Sure.
So let's see. All right, back to.
Always cracks me up. Ubi dooby doo. Where are you?
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So this controversy is back up. We can jump back to here. All right. So now that that's there, if you want to read a little bit, this is a small write-up that I did with Jake when we started it. This explains what the Substack is about, why we made it, kind of what we're up to. So feel free to check that out if you want to read a little bit more. All right, so the first one here, I'm going to try not to just read everything because I wrote a lot. This started off as one post, and it was just really long. And my co-substacker Jake, we have an editing process where we do a little workflow. We do in draft, and then when it's ready for edits, you move it to ready for edits. and then we will just kind of go in and try to tear each other's writing apart, try to just make it as rigorous as possible. And then when it's ready to publish, we'll move it over. And he was just like, this is just so long. And I agreed. So I split it up and it turned into kind of 3 posts. So I'll try not to read everything. We're going to go at the start. I just kind of introduce a little bit about what I'm doing. There's a couple of caveats that I mentioned up front, which is I didn't have time to go in and just rewatch the thing. That debate was, several hours long, like some of these are. And there were some things that stuck out in my head that I wanted to address. And so I didn't have time to kind of go back and find the timestamps and make sure everything was like quoted accurately. I had a rough idea of what I wanted to address that came up in the debate, and that's what I wanted to tackle. Now, the first part here is the preliminary reflections. So the first point, just a quick shout out to guys. Like, debating is really hard. Elijah, you've debated before. I've never done like a live, YouTube debate. Just done a lot of personal sparring and arguing with friends and colleagues and different things over the years. But debating is really tough live, and it's tough to think on your feet. It's tough to respond to things maybe when you're caught off guard. It's tough to try to handle what you want to say plus what you're hearing and taking notes and responses. So I think anytime you see a debate, there's a lot of like, oh, owned or destroyed, and there's just all this talk, and I try to stay away from as much of that as I can and just really show respect where it's due. Anybody who comes into debate, I think, merits respect because it's tough. So that's the first part. I think Erick won the debate. I think objectively he was able to answer enough of the objections from Denny. He stayed within the bounds of the debate resolution, and he had he brought up some really good stuff. I think there's some ways that Erick could have I think Erick's maybe sometimes too nice sometimes, and but that's probably a virtue of his and not anything else. But I think he could have really dug in a little bit here and there. And I try to point out maybe some of the ways that he could have done that. But overall, yeah, I think he won the debate. And at the same time, Ubi, these guys have a lot of skeptical objections that they bring up that Catholics haven't really heard of a lot of times. I think they're reading some really good authors, some really smart Anglican authors, for example. So I know Denny Sellin, the Ubi Petrus guy, he usually recommends a book by Edward Denny from, I think, the 1930s called Papalism, and it's by an Anglican, and he has a lot of really interesting objections to Catholicism, to the papacy. F.W. Puller, B.J. Kidd. There's a lot of very smart Anglicans that wrote against the papacy, and back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and a lot of these Eastern Orthodox guys online, like Ubi, are pulling a lot of their content from these guys. And so, if you're not aware of that, if you're not familiar with those objections, you can be caught off guard. And Erick's not; he's very familiar with all of those, objections and authors as well. But all that to say, Ubi does bring a lot of interesting, sometimes compelling, skeptical arguments, and it's up to the Catholic to really know what those are, how to respond to them. If they go wrong, where do they go wrong, and so forth. So I try to acknowledge the worth of those objections as well. Denny and Erick, they're clearly well read. I mean, if you watch the debate, they're able to recite people and events and dates. It's really impressive. Final third of the debate was off topic but enjoyable. Things calmed down a little bit. It had a different feel to it. I didn't like that it was kind of so off topic, because I really they hardly touched the Vigilius affair, for example, in the Fifth Council, and that's kind of what was supposed to be like the big part of this debate. So that was disappointing, but at the same time, there were some really nice aspects of that debate. If you haven't watched it yet, the link's at the top of this page. Okay, so while Erick maintained a calm and friendly demeanor throughout the debate, I was disappointed to see Denny lose his composure at times. There was a couple ways that he did this. One was where, he's like, he cited something with some pope, and he goes, how's that working out for you? And it was just kind of like, it kind of came off emotive and effeminate and just passive aggressive, to be honest, and that was kind of disappointing. But Erick, to his credit, is very cordial and is just extremely nice and is extremely fair in these debates. And you really saw that juxtaposition. I think this has been accentuated with the voice of reason versus Ubi debate that's happened recently. I think that was an even bigger mismatch there. But in this debate, Erick just did a really good job of keeping his composure, whereas Denny just kind of had a couple of moments where he said some kind of emotive, passive-aggressive things.
And he's always been like that for me, as far as I can remember. Ubi
Okay.
Petrus,
Yeah.
snarky, because I've been dealing with him for 5 years. Actually, I've been
Yeah.
dealing with him for longer than 5 years. I don't know if you know, but Denny and I and Eric, we used to go at it on these Orthodox war zones, and I actually have
Yeah.
emails from 2016, 2017 with Denny and I going at it. Not that we're emailing each other, but when
Yeah.
you post something, it'll email you saying, he
Yeah.
responded.
Oh, no way.
Um,
That's cool.
yeah, so and I actually pulled those out. I pulled those up. I was like, oh man, and we're talking about the same things. The
Yeah.
papacy, we're talking about the collegiality things and stuff like that. And then you mentioned Vigilius. I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's
Yeah.
funny you said that you were disappointed because Eric and I were preparing for the debate, and we were really preparing for the Vigilius part. And
Yeah.
so we had all this like ammunition, and it never really was brought up except for like one question that was unrelated to what we prepared for. But go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there.
No, you're good. Feel free to interrupt whenever if you want to add something. Doesn't have to be a one-way thing. Um, yeah, the Vigilius thing, I was kind of disappointed. I thought that was I'll get to the resolution here in just a second, but that was kind of a bummer that didn't play as big of a role as it probably should have in the debate. The last point in my introductory remarks is just it's good to keep in mind that, especially on these things, it's the Catholicism. There's the meme that Catholicism has main character energy, and that's why it's everybody attacking it. Like I don't really feel the need to go around and like try to attack everybody else's worldviews. I'm more interested in try to present what Catholicism is and then respond to objections. That's my approach. But everybody is attacking Catholicism these days, and I welcome that. But it's always good to remember that, especially in this debate with the debate resolution and what they were actually supposed to be arguing. Even if you thought Eric lost, which I don't, but even if you did, that doesn't mean that any other particular position is correct. They're not in the classic Aristotelian sense. They're not contradictory. So contradictory propositions are one is true, one has to be true, the other one has to be false, right? But contraries can both be false. And so with contrary positions, just because one is false doesn't mean the other one is true. And so that's good to keep in mind rhetorically, and just with your own reason, is that when you're watching a debate and it's two contrary positions, not contradictory positions, but contraries, you have to remember that just because one, if you feel like one is refuted or one is false, that doesn't mean the other one is true. Most people don't remember that. Most people confuse. They need to look at the Aristotle's square of opposition and know that a contradiction is not the same as a contrary, and why they're different. All right, that's my nerdy point about that. So yeah, I'm just going to glance over this. I didn't think the debate was sufficiently focused or moderated. It kind of bounced over a lot of different places. I feel like Matt Fradd, that's kind of his job as the moderator. I understand if it was like, well, it was so nice because toward the end they were just kind of going everywhere and that was cool. It's like, that is kind of nice. But as I point out in the last part, when a debate has a clearly defined resolution, and this one was, let's see, what was this one? It literally said, is the Vatican I concept of primacy manifest in the 5th, 6th centuries of the undivided church? So there's papal infallibility defined at Vatican I, and there's papal primacy or supremacy that's defined at Vatican I. Now, those are two separate things, okay?
Yeah.
And it only says just primacy, but it says in the 5th and 6th centuries. And it just bounced. Ubi was throwing objections from way before the 5th and 6th centuries, from after. He was talking about infallibility. He brought up Bishop Gasser. I mean, he was just kind of all over the map.
Well,
And
just to be fair, be fair, so the actual debate up until that point was supposed to be 5th and 6th century, but the back and forth conversation between the two, anything goes on that one.
Was
So
that part of the debate where it's like, okay, at the end we're just going to talk, or
yeah, that was the agreement between them. So the actual cross-examination, the opening, the rebuttal, all that 5th and 6th all day. And Eric purposely agreed to do 5th and 6th because of Vigilius. He wanted to be challenged.
Yeah.
And I give him kudos and credits all day for that, because a lot of Catholics wouldn't want to debate that topic, right? But he specifically wanted, and he agreed to that because he wanted to be challenged on Vigilius, because part of him wanted to be like, all right, here, this is where we're the most vulnerable. Show me what you got, right? Because
Yeah.
this is where I'm going to be convinced or not convinced right here of
Yeah.
Eastern Orthodoxy. So he wanted to kind of lay it all out. And then, so once the cross-examination was done and they did the back and forth, anything goes at that point. So to be fair to Ubi and to Erick and to Matt Frad,
Sure.
that's part of the whole. That was part of the whole. Maybe they should have been clear on that.
Yeah, I think that was a little bit of a, because it was just this title. I just copy pasted the title here from the from the thing. Yeah, it wasn't super clear why that was, but honestly I think even before that section, Ubi was throwing objections around from or I mean references to things and events from earlier centuries and whatnot.
True.
But
Yeah.
that is helpful context, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But the reason I bring this up is that, when a debate has a clearly defined resolution and one participant prepares accordingly, he can be unfairly disadvantaged if the moderator allows the discussion to drift too far afield. That didn't happen here because Erick is more than capable of addressing the broad range of topics, but as a matter of principle, it's poor form in any debate setting. So I'm glad to hear that that was part of the plan thing. I think it was a little unclear, but that does nullify my point. So destroyed.
Yeah, destroyed.
I will say, just to reiterate the first opening part, these are topics that stuck out to me during the debate. There's no way to address all of the things. There's a lot of important stuff that I don't touch in my 3-part series. These are just the ones that stuck out to me that I felt like maybe I had something to say that I didn't see other people saying.
Yeah.
All right. So the autocracy straw man. I think we all have kind of seen this autocracy term become really popular in the last couple of years with Eastern Orthodox debates, and now with Protestants even, where it's like, all right, well, show me the autocrat in the early church. Show me the Pope who's an autocrat. The Pope need to be an autocrat. If you're going to prove Vatican I, then you have to show that the Pope was an autocrat. Blah blah blah. That's kind of the standard spiel, and I think that's a straw man. There's a lot of stuff in here. I don't know if I want to read it all, but this starting point is just literally quoting Vatican I. So I will read this. It said, if you're going to lecture Catholics on the meaning of their councils, at least you can do is read them. Here's what the council actually said. The power of the Supreme Pontiff by no means detracts from that ordinary and immediate power of episcopal jurisdiction by which bishops who have succeeded to the place of the apostles by the appointment of the Holy Spirit tend and govern individually the particular flocks which have been assigned to them. On the contrary, this power of theirs is asserted, supported, and defended by the supreme and universal pastor. And it has this really good quote by St. Gregory. So this is just reaffirming what I highlight as the principle of subsidiarity. And I try to talk about why the autocracy straw man. Autocracy kind of connotes a kind of raw power. I can do something, therefore I will. I can do something, therefore I should.
Right.
And that's not the view of Vatican I's view of papal supremacy. That's not what it said. It says the opposite. And so I think in Catholic social teaching, there's this principle of subsidiarity. But it's not just about Catholic social teaching. It applies to any kind of organized hierarchical structure. And so I say the exercise of authority in the church admits of minimum and maximum degrees of perfection. And the ideal, this kind of maximum, what authority in the Catholic Church looks like according to Vatican I at its best is for the church to operate under the principle of subsidiarity. And that's what that passage above is hinting at, is that the Pope does not detract from or trample over, or he's not to do that to anybody else. Just because he has a power doesn't mean he needs to use that power at all or all the time. Principle of subsidiarity says that what you can do at the lower level, you should not promote to the higher level what can be done at the lower level. And I think our government, for example, would be a lot better if we followed subsidiarity. And that's why the Catholic principle is such a strong part of social teaching. So I say it's more than ideal for the Pope to rule in collegiality with his fellow bishops or allow subsidiarity rule than to do something on his own. And Vatican I just says that he has the authority de jure to do it on his own if he needs to. It doesn't say he has to use it. It doesn't say he needs to use it all the time. It doesn't really matter how often he uses it or not. It says there's a kind of power that the Pope has, and that's it. That's all it says. He has this prerogative. It doesn't say he should use it all the time. We should expect him to see it all the time. So that's that's that paragraph there. Any questions on that, or keep moving?
Yeah. So, and folks know the work that I've done on showing the context of Vatican I and the fact that the fathers of Vatican I, what they had in mind was that the Pope would work with his brother bishops every time it dealt with the Church Universal. So they didn't even see him acting alone. They didn't expect him to act alone. So to expect us to come up with an example that goes contrary to the mind of the fathers of Vatican I is, like you said, a straw man, right? Because Ubi would push back and say, well, if you're going to say that he has the power to act alone, which we would agree, he does have the power, and he can if he wants to, he would say, well, if you're going to say that he has it, then you're going to have to show it to me in the first millennium to prove that he has it. And if you can't show it to me, then that means he doesn't have it, or that means you're failing to prove your point. And so my pushback on that is, well, the way the papacy is supposed to work is that the Pope works with his brother bishops. So that's how we should expect to see things play out every time, right? Is the Pope working with his brother bishops. I don't know if there is a single example in the history, whether it's first or second millennium, even second millennium, that has to do with dogmatic matters when it comes to papal infallibility, where the Pope is doing anything without his brother bishops or doing anything that's in opposition to his brother bishops. And that's what they're expecting us to show them, right?
Yeah, I think you can probably find instances of that, but to your point, like this is the ideal. This is how it should be. And so trying to look for instances of how it's maybe not supposed to be, or maybe an extraordinary circumstance or something like that, is a little bit odd. And it is a straw man. And the Eric did bring up a couple of examples, I mean, from Galatius and different things in the debate where he's basically asserting his own authority in certain ways. But yeah, it's not the norm. It would be either maybe an abuse of power in a certain way, or an extraordinary circumstance where you see that kind of like autocratic behavior, right? And so to just kind of like say that, especially when Vatican I doesn't say that, it just doesn't say that
Right.
you should expect to see that all the time.
Right. And even if the Pope is going to do anything alone, the difference, what Ubi wants us to show, is the Pope acting alone in opposition to the bishops. Because if the bishops' consent is behind the Pope, then that to him is not acting alone. Well, there's no such thing, and Vatican I did not see the Pope acting in opposition to the bishops, right? That's an absurdity in our position, to have the Pope acting in opposition to the bishops. So if the Pope acts alone, which he has the power to, but he has the bishops behind him in his act, as far as they have, the same belief as him, and they agree with him, then to Ubi, that's not acting alone, because he has the bishops behind him. So what is acting alone? It's for him to actually be the only one who holds the opinion in opposition to the bishops, and he wins the day.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So there's two things that I'd add on top of that. One is, even if you think in principle that can happen in accord with Vatican I, which I'm fine with that in principle, right? But even if you think that, it still could have totally be by historical happenstance that it just never happened. And how would that refute it, just because there never was an occasion for that to happen, where every single bishop was against the Pope? So it's an absurd metric.
Right.
That's not what Vatican I teaches, and the only reason I can think that you would try to proffer that is because it makes your case easier, but
Yeah.
it's the wrong target. And so I'm happy to point this stuff out to people, but if people could persist in doing that, then it's like, at this level, you're being dishonest. You're not.
Right.
You want to try to steel man your opponent's position, not straw man your opponent's position. And so it's unfortunate that this is taken a life of its own, this autocratic thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to discuss here, obviously, even more than we'll get into.
Yeah.
But the main takeaway is just the practices of this. Maybe can summarize: the practice of subsidiarity cannot be opposed to papal supremacy. It's
Right.
at the heart of what Vatican I is talking about. It's rather the perfect expression of papal authority in practice. And again, if you are expecting, well, I need to see the Pope, everybody's against the Pope, and he's just like, boom. It's like, well, first of all, if the Pope doesn't have imperial power, this gets to the auctoritas potestas thing that we probably won't have time for tonight. But if he doesn't have like the authority of the empire to coerce people to obey, well, then you might not ever know which side is right. If you're looking for that kind of like powerful sweep you off your feet. So it's a bad metric. It's a straw man. And yeah, the big takeaway here, the second thing is his authority is ordered toward the good of safeguarding the faith and confirming the bishops.
Yes.
It's not a de jure right to do what I want. It's teleological. It's ordered towards those goods, and he bears moral duties to the universal flock. He bears moral duties, if we've talked about in private, and as Vatican I says, to any kind of papal definition that he might define. He has a moral duty to do his due diligence. That's not a juridical requirement for the validity of his statement, but it's a moral requirement on him. And so it is for decisions on papal supremacy. So to reduce it to mere power is simply to misread the council's decrees. I'm not going to read this. There's a really great, I've been reading through some of Leo the 13th encyclicals. He's got one, De Aeternum, on the origin of civil power. It's really awesome. I put a quote in here. Feel free to go check it out. Hopefully you can see the relevance to our discussion on the autocracy strawman. But since the Pope is an autocrat, Catholics don't need to supply evidence of his autocracy. Not arbitrary. Steward, not a tyrant. The true image is not an iron-fisted ruler, but one who walks softly and carries a big stick.
See, I love that. That actually was the thing that stood out for me out of your whole thing, is that line right there.
Okay, yeah.
Because that's beautiful, the way you put that. That's the image that we need to have of the Pope.
Right. Yeah, and so if you're looking for this first part, that's a straw man, and it's not what we would have wanted. And now to kind of illustrate this straw man and to try to highlight what Vatican I is really getting at, I bring up the model of Pope St. Gregory the Great. And the irony of this is there's kind of like a stock objection that you've heard from maybe Protestants or Eastern Orthodox that, papal supremacy is false because Pope St. Gregory declined the title of universal bishop, right? So I'm sure we've all heard that one before.
So
I'm not going to, right, yeah. And so I'm not going to go too far into that one from what I've listed here, but that's a very, very bad objection. But if you kind of look into what is behind St. Gregory the Great, why he did that and what's going on, it actually kind of highlights and is kind of like a microcosm of these points about Vatican I and what it really said about the autocracy objection. So Gregory rebukes John of Constantinople for trying to arrogate to himself the title of universal bishop. And he says, lo, Peter received the keys of the heavenly kingdom, and power to bind and loose is given him. The care and principality of the whole church is committed to him, and yet he is not called universal apostle. Why the most holy man, my fellow priest John, attempts to be called universal bishop, while the most holy man attempts to be called universal bishop. And then I provide a quote here that distinguishes between two meanings that this could have had. And one is that there's an order. The first implies that there's one bishop in the whole world, really, and in whose person the universal episcopate is comprised and concentrated. The other asserts a supreme power over every bishop of the United States, of the universal church. Sorry, I said that. So when you kind of look at these two ways that universal bishop can be understood, you can see that one of them is false and very bad, and the other one is true. But there's this problem of we're not going to bring this title on ourselves that has this baggage of those two meanings. So the title's first meaning regards the order of bishops, and it's wrong because it deprives all other bishops of their proper dignity. For every bishop is equal to the Pope in order. And this is another thing that you'll see a lot. People will bring a quote from this father or that, where it talks about equality, this, and you always have to ask, are we talking about jurisdiction or are we talking about order? And when I say they're equal in order, is that they're equal in their sacerdotal office of administering the sacraments and their authority to teach and to lead as spiritual fathers. So there's a kind of equality of order, but that's separate from whether there's an equality of jurisdiction, because even in Eastern Orthodox, you have a patriarch or a metropolitan bishop who doesn't have the same jurisdiction even as a lower level priest in his diocese, right? He doesn't have the same authority. He has a higher authority. So obviously, if you're Eastern Orthodox, you already admit this distinction, but it applies to bishops, patriarchs, and all the way up the chain. So Gregory knows that this title universal bishop can mean one or the other, and one of those is true, but the other one is really bad and is false. And so this is a summary from a solid 19th century author. This is Gregory again. Who is this that against the evangelical ordinances, against the decrees of canons, presumes to usurp to himself a new name? Would indeed that one by himself he were, if he could be without any lessening of others. And so he's, again, when he says that, I should have italicized this. It would be great if he could have a kind of title like that, or if anybody could, without the lessening of others. And this repeats back what he's talking about up here. Sorry, I didn't get there yet. It gets up to this point where if the lessening of others that Pope St. Gregory is talking about is that if people are understanding universal bishop in this order of as kind of collapsing the episcopate onto one person in terms of order, then it lessens the dignity and reduces the dignity or removes it from every single bishop and priest, really. And he's saying, would be that you could do that without lessening any lessening of others. He that covets to be universal. Certainly in honor of Peter, Prince of the Apostles, it was offered by the Venerable Synod of Chalcedon to the Roman Pontiff. So they offered it to him, is what he's saying. But we declined it, not because there's no sense in which it is true, but because there's a sense in which it's false that's disastrous. But none of them has ever consented to use this name of singularity, lest, this is why they're not doing it, by something being given peculiarly to one, priests in general should be deprived of the honor due them. So he's talking about that distinction between order and jurisdiction. How is it then that, this is a nice dig actually, very based Pope Gregory, how is it then that we do not seek the glory of this title even when offered, and another presumes to seize it for himself, though not offered? So that's that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So there's a really good passage here that kind of leads to, and as I was kind of like writing this section, I realized there was a couple connections. One to the incarnation. So Christ, by his own words and by the authority given to the Father in the incarnation, he held the power from the Father, and so there's the power of all power right here incarnate. but is that an autocratic kind of display of power that goes around and tries to show his power? It's not. And so as I reflected on that, I decided to move that direction as a kind of analogy to close out this section. So there's a good passage from Father Battalla from the 1900s. He says, the popes refused this honorary title because they remembered that they were the vicars of him who said, learn of me, for I am humble of heart. Their office was to inspire their fellow bishops with the same sentiments of humility, and they could not have effectively succeeded in this task had they coveted so singular a title. They recalled the great lessons taught them by Christ. He that is greatest among you, let him, the greatest, literally the greatest, be as one who serves. Having refused the title of universal bishop, they adopted instead that of servi servorum Dei, in order to follow the divine counsel by making themselves the least of all. Though superior to all in power and authority, and certainly by the mark of humility alone, could the popes check with the pride and ambition of the bishops of Constantinople. This is a repeated thing. It's kind of the height of irony that Eastern Orthodox or even Protestants will really Eastern Orthodox will come in and say it's really because of the imperial status of Rome and all of this prestige that you tried to arrogate all this power to yourself. It's like, actually, Canon 3 of Constantinople 1, Canon 28, trying to arrogate the title of universal bishop multiple times by the patriarchs. Constantinople was the one doing exactly that. And it's kind of like the every accusation is a confession. That phrase we've probably heard before, and it's like this is the kind of same thing here with this issue of who's really trying to arrogate power to themselves. So yeah, I just have some commentary on this. This portion here, yeah. Okay, so Gregory understood himself as the successor of Peter, the one to whom Christ gave the keys and entrusted the care and principality of the whole church. So power rightly held comes with rights, but a just ruler does not claim every right because he can. The virtue Gregory embodied is exactly what we see in the scandal of the cross. Cool to move on to the end of this section. Elijah?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry. I just have have one.
Maybe.
Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Hold on one second. Can you hear me now? Let me see.
Hey, Ali, what's up?
So you can't hear me?
If y'all can hear me, I'll just keep on going until Elijah has his sound figured out. Y'all can hear me, right?
Let me
private
see.
chat. Okay, let me. Not sure what's okay. Yeah, I can hear. Okay, so people can hear us. I can't hear Elijah. Let me make sure that my.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say I can hear because I'm not on mute, so you can't hear me at all.
No, I can hear you now. I got to switch it back to.
Sweet.
It switched off of my Bluetooth. I don't know why it did that, but
you're good, brother. I did want to say one more thing about what you're saying about Pope Gregory, because this is something that, as you mentioned, comes up all the time. This universal bishop as a refutation, minimalist audio, as a refutation to Vatican I. But if you put it beautifully, the way you have it all set up here in this section, this is a great section to refute that, because the very first thing that you quoted was Vatican I, is the fact that the Pope is not to usurp the power, but to confirm the power of the local bishop. And then it quotes, ironically, Pope Gregory.
Yeah, exactly.
My honor is your honor, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a difference between being a universal bishop and having a universal care. Vatican I and the popes of first and second millennium believed they had universal care for the church. They had a duty of caring for the universal church. That's different than being a universal bishop, which Vatican I rejects, as do all the popes reject it. Universal bishop means that there's only one real bishop in the whole church.
Yeah.
Everyone else is his subjects, right? No one really has any rights. They're all his subjects, right?
They don't have that equality of order, of sacerdotal order.
Correct.
Yeah, it's the Gregory quotes are really kind of an eye opener when you're used to hearing that objection and you actually go read what was actually happening with the universal bishop situation. And again, this is just kind of a microcosm. There's so many. I think I sent you a tweet today of someone who was trying to object to Catholicism, of the papacy, an Eastern Orthodox guy, and he quotes. He sends a screenshot of a passage from Canon 28 of Chalcedon, and it's like, okay, if there's one canon you don't maybe want to use as a way to own the papists, so to speak, you don't even want to use that one, because when you actually look into it, it turns out there's a lot of red pills that are there. So I think this is one of them. People trying to do kill shots. There aren't really kill shots on either side. It's a lot of hard won debating Catholicism. There's a lot of interesting objections that we have to respond to that are compelling. I don't want to deny that at all, but there are definitely some self-owns, we'll call them that people try to use. And the universal bishop one is kind of one of them, but you don't know it if you don't look into it. And I think part of what I'm trying to write on with this, especially with the Welton book, is that it's got 5 stars on Amazon, because people read it and they don't know anything. They don't know anything about their own tradition, especially if you are coming from, I'm coming from more of like a traditional Latin Mass portion, and there's been a lot of maybe disgruntled TLMers out there, and maybe rightly so in some ways. But if you're disgruntled and you're disaffected and you are being taught even by Catholics to kind of bash the Pope and hate your own tradition and all this different stuff, then you're primed and ready. If you're not grounded in reality and in history, you're primed and ready for someone to sweep you off your feet with a book like that. And so, especially if you don't know how to really like weigh the arguments and look for what the other side has to say. And that's again, when you look at my Welton series, it's called, I'll get there in a minute. I'm sidetracking. Let's finish this section here.
Oh, you're good.
All right. So there was another analogy here again with Christ and the cross, and I thought it was relevant. So why did so many Jews reject their true Messiah? They rejected Christ in the face of his claims to power, not because he lacked what he claimed, but because he did not exercise or manifest it in a manner that fit their expectation and attachments. Expecting a triumphant military figure or a political redeemer, they missed him because they wrongly assumed that possessing power meant enjoying power's every right. In other words, they were looking for an autocrat. We see this mindset on full display at the foot of the cross. I had this passage in mind, using the King James Version, of course. I got to shout out the King James Version. It's my favorite. So good. I think Catholics should read it more.
Heretic.
But yeah, that's right. This one actually might not be. I can't remember which ones were King James. There was a couple where it's like, it was RSV, another one were King James. This one is passage from Mark. So, and those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "Aha, you who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." So also the chief priests mocked him to one another with the scribes, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. Let Christ, the King of Israel, come down from the cross that we may see and believe." And of course, most of us are very familiar with these passages, and what's going on is, here's what they expect is an autocrat. And they have the most powerful man to ever walk the earth, God incarnate on the cross. And the irony of that is striking, especially on this subject, is that they've got the Lord who said that all power was given to me under heaven and on earth. The Father gave Jesus authority to execute judgment, and Jesus taught as one having authority, and with authority and power he commanded the unclean spirits. He had such power to forgive sins, and even the wind and the sea obeyed him. He told Pilate, "No one would have power at all against me, except it were given to him from above." But on the other hand, that's what they expected, and that's what Jesus had. But that doesn't mean what you have is what you have to exercise and display, especially to some metric of the Jews of the time, or nowadays to the Eastern Orthodox or the Protestants. Our Lord also said that whoever would be greatest among you must be your servant. The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. He came, as the prophecies foretold, not to boldly retake the kingdom with pompous entourage, but to cometh unto thee meek and sitting upon an ass. And the incarnation itself involves not asserting every claim of rightful power. There's the famous passage from Philemon from St. Paul. So I conclude, like the mocking Jews and Roman soldiers at the foot of the cross who jeered, "Where is thy mighty Messiah?" Modern Eastern Orthodox skeptics ask Catholics, "Where is thy autocratic successor of St. Peter?" Both miss the nature of the promise and the power it entails. And then the final analogy is just that as a husband and father, and if you're an Eastern Orthodox, we should agree with this, as I have a kind of primacy of authority within my own home, with my wife and my children, but I'm not an autocrat with that power, and I'm not to exercise every right that power might entail. And my authority is ordered to the good of my family, and I'm morally bound to exercise it toward that end, including the manner and tone of its exercise. And this includes a lot of things. Trying to be more conciliar, trying to work with my wife more collegially, so to speak. It would be ridiculous to look at that and be like, "Aha, well, you must not think that you have the authority because you're acting collegially." It's like, no, this is the principle of subsidiarity still applies. This is the ideal exercise of my power, is in collegiality in support of my lower members. So to the extent that I fail in this duty, I stand gravely. The same applies to the Pope. All right, so that's the autocracy objection. That's one of the biggest sections in my whole review. We good so far? Do we want to dwell here, take any questions?
So I do see a couple questions. We can ask the questions in the end if you have some time. So feel free, brother, to just keep rolling. Okay,
cool. Yeah, there are some good questions in here that would be good to get to. We'll roll to the end of this first part, and then we'll take stock. And if we need to address the questions, we'll do that
Sure.
Does that sound good? Okay.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay. So this next section is called Sophistical Linguistic Objections. That title is intentional. I think there's something sophistical. So sophistical has to do with engaging in sophistry, which is the use of rhetoric to control, to manipulate it, or mislead. If you're familiar with Plato's dialogues, you see a lot of this kind of thing in Socrates and his debates, and usually Socrates will kind of dismantle the sophist in a certain way, and then we'll find someone else who's misguided but who's honest, and we'll be debating with him. So Denny objected to Erick's appeal to the formula of Pope Hormisdas on the grounds that its use of always wasn't literal. So the formula of Pope Hormisdas is kind of a famous letter or writing that had a lot of high papal claims, and it was used to basically get all of the Eastern bishops to sign on to end a particular schism. I don't have time to go into maybe all the background on this, but it's one of the biggest. It's a very powerful support for papal infallibility and papal supremacy. I think both. And Denny said some things about it. I wasn't able to go in the debate and find, again, all the timestamps, but I know that he had written about it in his blog, and it was very similar to what he said in the debate. So what I did is I did this footnote here on number 7. By the way, I try to footnote everything really well and provide really good sources for everything I do in my Welton series and this. So if you go through and you think something's interesting, you look at a quote, go look at the authors I do. Maybe I'll put a list out at some point of all my favorite authors on these topics. But for the time being, if you go through this footnotes, there's all kinds of good stuff to read. So just for what it's worth. So I footnote here to his article, and I have a comment there. And yeah, so I think this objection here about always. So the reason he kind of objected to the formula and tried to downplay and be like, well, it's got this statement here in the Apostolic See, the Catholic religion has always been kept unsullied. And in my footnote, I make a couple of comments. One is the formula is a confession of faith, regula fide, that Pope Hormisdas sent for the Eastern bishops to sign. The sentence in which always appears, I don't even think that that's maybe the most powerful. It's certainly a powerful sentence, but it might not even be the most powerful one. So even if this always objection goes through, it's not like that's the only thing in that document that matters. But it's also not the only way that you can translate it. And so he's trying to make this objection about a word always in the English from this ancient document from a different language, the translation of which doesn't even necessarily have to have the import of the word always. And so it was a very strange objection, but I've seen it bandied about a couple of times. And again, this is one of those where if you're not prepared for it, it'll catch you off guard and maybe cause you to doubt. So in the debate, if I recall, the reason for thinking it wasn't literal seemed to be nothing more than the fact that always in other ecclesiastical contexts was used in an exaggerated or flowery sense. Danny provided some quotations showing these contexts during cross-examination. So you kind of listed off these examples or these quotations from different, maybe this council or this father or the emperor talking where they use always. It's like, again, this is an English word. If you want to get into the papal honorifics thing, like we can get into that, but at the bare bones level, you can't just start off with the English translation and work your way backwards. So I said, this is a terrible objection. First of all, if you think about our language, basically every word in our language can be used literally or figuratively, precisely or with exaggeration. That's how language works. The fact that a word is exaggerated in one context doesn't mean it is exaggerated in another. If it's exaggerated in most contexts, that doesn't mean that it's exaggerated in this context over here. You have to work with that context and determine it from its context. Moreover, Denny's objection proves too much. If taken seriously, it would undermine the authority of councils in sacred scripture. For every council that contains binding decrees does so with words that in other contexts are or can be used figuratively or with exaggeration. As an example, I give this canon from the Fifth Council. Mary, Mother of God, and always a virgin. If you deny that, let it be anathema. So there's always right there in that translation. We might need to go investigate that one, because they might not have meant always. in that anathema. Jesus told his disciples that he would be with them always, even to the end of the age. Perhaps Denny is doubtful of our Lord's promise. After all, always doesn't always mean always. And we might need to ensure that the Greek usage of that term is consistent across all the New Testament before we take him at his word. Sarcasm aside, I have a quote from Sachensky where he says this is an uncompromisingly Chalcedonian document that contained one of the strongest affirmations of Rome's teaching authority ever accepted in the East. So obviously Sachensky doesn't look at that and say, well, they didn't really mean it. It's like this was something that was a strong statement. And how can it be strong if it involved mere exaggeration? So the bottom line is this: you cannot infer a priori that always in the formula, a priori, just Latin for before you look at the facts, before you look at the experience, before you look at the details. You can't decide a priori that this word in the formula is figurative or mere exaggeration simply because in other contexts the same word is exaggerated or figurative. You have to assess each usage on its own merits. The meaning of the term should be discerned from the immediate and broader context, not from its use elsewhere, though that usage may sometimes be helpful. I kind of do a little excursus. I don't think this came up in the debate, but this has come up in a debate with, I think Ubi had on James Locutus, and he brought up this objection. And I don't think, I think this is a bad objection, a really bad one, but I think James Locutus probably wasn't prepared for it. And he, and I think that's maybe part of the tactic is it doesn't even have to be a good objection, but if it's kind of novel and kind of out of the blue, it can kind of catch you off guard. I'd have to go back and listen to the Locutus thing again, but my sense at the time a few years ago was that he wasn't quite prepared for this one. It was kind of out of the blue.
Well, it was a ridiculously and embarrassingly bad objection to where it's like sometimes what do you say to these things, right? They're just so out there and ridiculous,
right?
That it strips away the context of the situation. First of all, to suggest such a ridiculous interpretation of the event, right? So, and I think Dr. Locutus, may he rest in peace.
That's right. Yeah.
I think his whole argument as a whole really deals with it. He doesn't really have to address it directly.
Yeah.
His whole argument in the debate already dealt with that, to where when Ubi made the objection, it kind of just hit a wall and fell. If you're being honest about.
I agree with that. I think objectively that is true. I think the problem is, and again, this goes back to this is the reality with Twitter, with YouTube. No offense to the YouTube people out there. I mean, I'm on YouTube right now, but with a lot of our media, and people need to be reading books and like studying texts and like writing. Like we need to be doing a little bit more due diligence because in that debate, objectively, I think you're right. But it probably landed a certain way because people are not able to separate. They don't know enough to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak.
Yes.
And so I think rhetorically there's a PR problem with some of these discussions or debates, especially if these guys have these savvy kind of Edward Denny papalism objections that they're able to lob out. Catholics have not seen them. They don't know what to do with them. And even if they have a decent response, rhetorically it can kind of come off a different way. But I agree, objectively it's just a bad objection.
That's a good point. Because I do remember people thinking that was like a kill shot in a sense.
And there was a couple points that people talk about with the kill shots in the Erick Ubi debate that actually didn't matter at all.
Right.
And I couldn't believe that people were talking about it. We can talk about that in a little bit, but there's no kill shots, first of all. And most people, if you think it's a kill shot, you probably don't know what you're talking about. So, all right. So we've seen this linguistic tactic before with always. When have we seen it? Well, we've seen it with suggestione. That's an Italian way of saying it. For example, in attempts to undercut the acceptance of Pope Agatho's letter of the Sixth Ecumenical Council by noting that the use of the Latin term suggestione meant something like a mere suggestion. Again, you're looking at something that's close to our English word suggestion, that in our common parlance has a very different understanding than even it would have 100 years ago in English. And then you're trying to read that back into the Latin. So did it mean something like mere suggestion in our modern English sense? a sense that connotes tentativeness. Pope Agatho was just making suggestions, you see. There's a clear reason the terms suggestion in Latin and anaphora in Greek appear in the records of the Third Council of Constantinople. These words do not imply hesitation or tentativeness. They reflect, first of all, the formal procedural language appropriate for addressing the emperor. So this section here, you got to keep in mind the language. This will come up again with the auctoritas potestas thing in part 3 on my postscriptum. You got to remember with these councils, they're separated by hundreds of years, most of them, right? And they're in the empire, and the imperial power at the time is very involved. And there's certain things you need to do and say in those contexts. And so these terms, as it turns out, are very important for making reports or bringing things up. And so that matters for how you talk to the emperor or how you raise things at a council. So in Roman and Byzantine administrative practice, those were formal terms for submitting a document, report, or doctrinal decree to a superior. So they could have been something lower level, they could have been something official, anywhere in between, but they're kind of tied to that administrative aspect. At the council, their use conveyed deference to imperial protocol, which was required while still expressing binding theological judgments. They were not rhetorical modesties, but the proper legal form for delivering authoritative doctrine within the imperial ecclesiastical structure of the time. I go into some detail on the two terms, if you want to look at it. Even apart from the background, it's just a suggestion objection falls on its own terms. The emperor, and the council fathers also use the term suggestion, which would mean that the entire council, including the imperial authority it appealed to, were merely floating suggestions. That's plainly absurd. For example, consider, I give this quote where the emperor said, "Let George, the most holy archbishop of this our holy preserved city, and let Macarius, the venerable archbishop of Antioch, and let the synod subject to him and their suffragans say, if they submit to the force of the suggestions sent by the most holy Agatho, Pope of Old Rome, and by his synod, therefore, let them say, therefore I give my submission to them, the suggestions, and thus profess and believe." This is going to be relevant below, actually, this last part to the Chalcedon thing. But as you can see, if you look at the context of it, are they supposed to say whether they submit to the force of the mere suggestion? Did the emperor submit to suggestions in our everyday colloquial American sense? The questions answer themselves. Obviously, you can't read common English parlance back into historical Greek or Latin. The Latin term suggestion and its Greek equivalent can mean something like declaration, and in any case, the context must determine the meaning. Support for this context is found even from the Eastern Orthodox scholar Edward Sichinski, who acknowledges that Pope Agatho insisted that there could be no doctrinal debate since the matter had already been decided at the Lateran Synod. So clearly Agatho and his delegation, none of them thought this was a suggestion. The context doesn't say, the context says it's not a suggestion in our sense. Pope Agatho and his delegation didn't think so at all. Final quote. In the Pros Phoneticus to the emperor, we read, "But the highest prince of the apostles fought with us, for we had on our side his imitator and the successor in his see, who had also set forth in his letter the mystery of the divine word. For the ancient city of Rome handed you a confession of divine character and a chart from the sun setting raised up to the day of dogmas, and made the darkness manifest, and Peter spoke through Agatho." So it's beyond ridiculous to suggest that Agatho, council fathers, emperor, etc., were proffering suggestions as we might understand the term today. No one mistook Pope Agatho as merely suggesting a view for consideration. Right. In summary, which is the objection? Is that he's making a suggestion? That is literally the objection. I'm not kidding. In summary, while the terms may have etymological roots that suggest bringing up or reporting, in the context of Pope Agatho's letter and the council, they are used to convey authoritative declarations rather than mere suggestions. The weight and authority of these declarations were recognized by the council in its proceedings. Whether always or suggestion, you can't refute papal supremacy or infallibility by defining translated words a priori. You need to deal with each case on its own and argue the meaning and intent from the context, especially when dealing with ancient languages.
Yep.
Any comments on that, or keep moving?
I think the fact that you said that this is not, like, this is actually the argument. You know, you're not even trying to make fun of it, right? This is the argument. I remember when I did a stream, with Alan Rule against Ubi Petrus's Lateran 649.
Yeah.
And we would sit there and read the arguments, and we would be puzzled as to how pathetic they are, and we're just like, there really isn't anything for us to say. The argument is so stupid.
Yeah.
Excuse my, I have to say, it really is so stupid that
You just have to read it. That's
you
the
just have to
response, is
read
to
it,
read it.
and just reading it refutes itself. You just move on, right? It's like, this is ridiculous. Like, no one's gonna buy this. You only buy this if you're on that team, and whatever he says, he could sit there and use gibberish, and you're like, oh, kill shot, right?
Yeah.
Imagine us using arguments like this, like, just so anachronistic. It doesn't hit. But I think people look at him as an intellectual, so whatever he says to them, oh, it sounds good because it's him saying it. It's kind of like Michael Jackson, when he does like a dance move, even though it looks really stupid, it's like, oh, Michael Jackson did that move, must be good, right?
That's right.
I guess it's
Yeah.
good because it's Michael Jackson, right?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway,
no, that's a good point. And it's I kind of make an analogy. I have a little commentary that I have that makes roughly this point, but it's, as an evangelical or a kind of a confessional Protestant back in the day, when, especially as a philosophy student, when the Richard Dawkins God delusion, all that stuff it got really popular. It's not really popular anymore, but it caught like wildfire.
right.
And I remember Protestant friends, people were just having this crisis of faith, and it's like, well, his objections aren't very good. He's really snarky. He's he straw mans everything, and he doesn't consider any response. It's just bad philosophy, bad objections. Yeah. But it's caught wildfire, and it actually had a big effect, and it caused people to leave the faith, to disbelieve, to become atheists, whatever the case is. There's a similar kind of phenomenon going on right now, and I don't know what's in the water, but it's if like this stuff like this is having an effect. Like when that debate happened, I don't know if it was the Luigi guy or somebody posted on Twitter the kill shot thing, where he was talking about Severius and Vigilius. It's like, and Eric was like, you know what, I actually I haven't looked into that enough to know what I think about that yet. I'm not decided what I think about with that yet. And it's like that. First of all, it wasn't really even an objection.
Right.
There's not really a big objection there at all. But people heard Eric say, I don't have an answer for that. What he really meant was like, I'm not sure what to make of that. I haven't decided yet. Yeah. But it's not even a real objection. But people heard that, saw it. They have no idea what they're talking about. But it seemed like a kill shot. And so it was posted and retweeted. So you literally have like low tier, it's like small brain people saying kill shot, and they have no clue what it's even about. And so that's kind of what we're up against. So even though saying the objection refutes it, it's like, unfortunately, we kind of do have to go in and make a response, because people are just getting taken over,
Yeah, and I think a lot of people thought that Vigilius question was about the Vigilius situation that we're familiar with.
Yeah, it's not.
And it has nothing to do with that, right?
It was about him, his status becoming Pope and his predecessor, and there's a lot of weird stuff going on there. But it doesn't have to do with the Vigilius affair that people think of. I happen to think, I get into some of this in my letters to an Inquirer. I think there are probably tougher objections from EOs or Protestants on the papacy than Vigilius. I actually think Vigilius is kind of a Catholic win. I'm probably a minority, but I kind of think that. We can talk about that another time. But okay, judging St. Leo's Tome at Chalcedon. I don't remember the timestamp, but it kind of got to St. Leo's Tome at Chalcedon, and Denny brought up. I forget exactly how it was brought up, but it was kind of brought up like this. Well, you've got Leo's tome, you've got what Leo says and does at the council, and then you have all these bishops and council fathers who are passing their own judgment on it, one by one.
Yeah.
Right. And that makes it sound like, oh, wow, this is conciliarism because it wasn't authoritative until they all judged it. And they said, I judge, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, what's going on there? There's actually, I was texting with, I have an Eastern Orthodox friend, quite a few of them. I have some really, really solid Eastern Orthodox friends, Antiochian, Russian, Greek. And I text with a couple of them, and one of them was reading this part. And I think he largely agreed with some of my responses to Ubi. He wouldn't take those approaches. But he said on the Chalcedon one, he's like, I kind of wanted some more context on that one. And so I might try to go on this section and maybe add a little bit more context to it. But in the context of my understanding of from the debate was saying, well, it's St. Leo's tome, but each of the fathers one by one is having to say, I judge, I judge, I judge. That makes it seem like it's not really authoritative from St. Leo. It gets its force from everybody else agreeing with it. I think that's not what happened at all.
Right.
And what I'm going to do here is, you'll notice in the Welton series especially, there's various distinctions, right? And as a philosophy student, you try to make distinctions, not ones that don't exist, but ones that are there. And there's a distinction here that I think is really important, and it kind of like epitomizes the kind of blurring of distinctions that happens in these debates. So, judging St. Leo's tome with Chalcedon, at one point in the debate, Denny suggested, I did that as a joke following the suggestion section. Denny suggested that Pope St. Leo's tome was not an instance of papal supremacy or infallibility, but quite the opposite. The Council of Fathers, he said, were each asked to judge whether it was true. However, the exact opposite is the case. So everyone should know, doesn't, but should, that I judge can be used in an adjudicative or a cognitive sense. The adjudicative sense of I judge that this is the case is to issue a binding verdict. It settles the dispute or answers the question, is this the case by authority? The cognitive sense is simply to express your assent or belief. It issues your personal commitment or conviction, answering the question, do you think this is the case? Now, anyone with even a cursory acquaintance with the history of the church councils knows that one purpose of issuing a formal definition is to bind all attendees to it by compelling each to state publicly and officially whether he assents. You'll notice, by the way, this is why I said this is relevant. Let George, the most holy archbishop of this our God-preserved city, and let Macarius, the venerable archbishop of Antioch, and let the synod subject to them say, he's asking them all to say if they submit, do you agree with this or do you not? Right? He's not saying in the adjudicative sense, do you agree with this? Is this the case? He's saying in the cognitive sense, he's wanting to proffer this up to bind everyone to it or not if they don't.
Good point.
So now, so anyone with even a cursory acquaintance with the history of church councils, like the one just above, the Sixth Council, knows that one purpose of issuing a formal definition is to bind all attendees to it by compelling each to state publicly and officially whether he assents. At Chalcedon, then, when each council father declares, I judge the contents of Leo's tome to be true, I don't know if that's exactly what everybody said, but just in response to what he's talking about, he's plainly speaking in the cognitive sense. He's not issuing a ruling, he's assenting to one. The tome was the adjudication. The fathers were compelled to respond to it by declaring their agreement or dissent to the adjudication.
Yep.
The adjudication already existed, and without it, there would have been nothing to bind the fathers to. To suggest that the tome was merely cognitive and that the fathers' affirmations of the tome adjudicative is a confusion so desperate that it scarcely merits refutation. Back to our point above, it is at best a last refuge of rhetorical self-preservation. So this concludes the critical reflections, part 1. In part 2, we will begin with analysis of Bishop Gasser's relatio, of how Bishop Gasser's relatio was handled during the debate. Do you want to answer questions here, or do we want to move on?
Yeah,
I have a little bit more time, so.
Yeah, how long do you have, brother?
I can probably go till like 10:45. Another, I can go 30, 35 minutes. If it gets real juicy, maybe a little bit more.
Okay, because I don't know if I want to do part 2 next time.
Yeah, we probably don't want to do too much, but
yeah, because we definitely want to do another part because it's already been almost an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And we do have some questions, so let's answer some questions and see where that goes. And then and then see how much time we have left. All right. So now Parker, he had to go to sleep, so he said he's gonna watch and come back.
Wise man.
Yeah. So I'm gonna do this and put you on there. All right. So, okay. Question from Ubi's perspective: the idea that we don't need a pope because we have unanimous consent of the bishops doesn't make sense. Acts 15 says there was much discussion. Then Peter came and addressed the group. There doesn't seem to be unanimous consent here. There seems to be disagreement. Then the Pope, Peter, stands up and makes a declarative judgment. How would you respond?
I think, I certainly think I'm going to go up to, because I wrote on Acts 15, because Welton talks about Acts 15. This is what, part 5. Audi alterum partum, the other side. Welton on the Jerusalem Council. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be I think Acts 15 is a bad case for Eastern Orthodox and Protestants. It's very common. It's like the Universal Bishop one. It's a very common thing to read that and to try to like misread it and say, well, this is some kind of evidence of conciliarism. But there's two things to say. First of all, you can read this on your own. I kind of go into detail here on Chrysostom, on into the text, into commentary, and then a bunch of even Protestant scholars down at the bottom who are just like, yeah, doesn't really support what Welton says. So anyway, you can come in and read this and judge for yourself if I'm right or not. But another point to make is again, you have a kind of, I get into this in part two more with the Gasser thing, but just because the Pope doesn't come in with a big stick and take over and try to silence everybody and yell and say, shut up, I'm the Pope. Don't discuss this. I already have the answer. Be quiet. Oh, James, you're the Bishop of Jerusalem. Sit down, take a seat. Like,
Right.
why would we expect that to happen? Like,
Yeah.
So Vatican I means that a Pope can't listen to people and like have a discussion and then they all make a decision. Why would having a power to do something mean you have to use that power in this strong autocratic way?
Right.
It's stupid. So that's stupid, first of all.
Yeah.
But then when you get into the actual Acts 15 thing, as I try to argue, I don't think it supports kind of the EO perspective. So this is kind of my take if you want to read it. Welton in his book, he kind of has his little quip. Welton is a master at just throwing out thousands of assertions and just, I mean, this is why this review, I mean, I've been working on this thing for over a year and I still haven't even got to Constantinople 1 because I'm busy, first of all, and I'm having a full-time job and kids and stuff.
Yep.
Last year we moved, we built a house. I had to sell our house. My wife had anemia after we had our baby. She broke her arm on Thanksgiving Day. Last year was a crazy year. So I'm a little bit behind, but even in addition to all that, like he has so many assertions. And I'm going to mention this real quick. Because I think this is relevant to the debate as well as to Welton. So I have one of my favorite quotes. So I love these old, there's a lot of really good old Anglican, even Presbyterian apologists from like the 1700s who are debating David Hume and all this stuff. I love that stuff. I got a bunch of these books. This guy here, George Horn, has this awesome quote that I use to kind of preface the entire Welton series, and I think it applies to contemporary debates. Pertness and ignorance may ask a question in 3 lines, which will cost learning and ingenuity 30 pages to answer. And as people in general like short objections better than long answers, we must be content to only reach those who possess enough honesty, erudition, and patience to study both sides of the question. So my Audi Alterum Partum, here the other side series, oops, I don't know why that's there, begins with this quote, because this is exactly what happens, is you can raise an objection in 3 lines that cost the person who has the answer 30 pages. Who's going to listen to the three lines? Everybody. Who's going to see the 30 pages that are necessary to respond and untangle it? Very few. Right. And so that's another reminder that when you see people trying to post the stupid kill shots that are actually not a kill shot at all, but they just don't know it. When you see that in that kind of fanfare, you just have to remember this is the long game. This is about doing honest work. And if I lose people by the wayside because they're not willing to see the answer to the 3-line objection, so be it. I'm not in charge. I want to faithfully discharge my duty to speak the truth and let God deal with the rest. That's a good reminder to have on these things. This introduction to the Welton series, I think, is good to have as context for any of these debates.
Well said.
So anyway, that's the Acts 15 one. I hope that answered your question, Parker. Happy to correspond as well later.
Yeah, he did say that he's on Twitter or X, and if he has any additional questions, he'll reach out. So if he reaches out, I can let you know and see what he says.
Yeah, if he subscribes, I can see his email. I can shoot him an email if he wants me to.
Oh, okay, sweet. And just if I were to give my thoughts on it, we have to remember that in the era of revelation, all the apostles are infallible, right? So really, they didn't really need to hold a council to answer the question. Any of the apostles could have answered the question because they were all infallible. They were all inspired. They're not infallible in the way the Pope is infallible. They're infallible more so than the way the Pope is infallible, because the Pope is not infallible. He can only speak in certain ex cathedra matters, right, in very specific conditions, and that's when he's infallible. But the apostles were infallible as a whole in their ministry, right? So whatever they teach is inspired by God. They cannot teach error, and so we have to really put that back into the context of their time, and not try to take Acts 15 as a model for anything. Now, we can use it as a model for something, right? But we can't make it absolute, right? So I know Eastern Orthodox will say, "Oh, James was the leader," and Catholics say, "Oh, Peter was the leader." Well, I think both James or Peter could answer the question for us because they were both infallible, right? So
Yeah.
that's that. Number two,
Yeah.
if I can remember what number two was, I had another point. I can't remember. I had 3 points. I remembered one out of the 3, so at least it's something.
You're good. No, that's a good point.
Yeah. And that's, I actually got that point from Erick, because I never thought of it that way. So Erick once mentioned that to me, and I was like, that's actually a genius point. I never thought of it that way. But to your point, I think somebody can look at it and say Peter was the head, right? Because he spoke first. He settled the matter, and then James spoke at the end. But when does speaking at the end mean you have the decision? The decision was already made by Peter, and James was just agreeing with him, right?
Yeah.
But I do like what you said. Just because the Pope has the prerogative doesn't mean he doesn't listen. That's the point of the papacy. Oh, that's what it was. Let's take this Acts 15 in today's papacy, right? The Eastern Orthodox would look at that and say, well, the Pope should be able to just answer the question because he just knows everything. That's how they look at the Pope, right?
Yeah.
Oh, since he's the Pope, he's infallible. Why doesn't he just answer the question? As if there's a question at hand, now he's going to have the answer automatically, right? It's an automation. It's not like that. It's a divine assistance. So the divine assistance requires that the Pope does his due diligence to find the answer. The way he does his due diligence is he goes to the scriptures, tradition, to the church, to the bishops, and he seeks the answer, and he makes sure what he's about to decree is the answer, rather than just kind of like guessing and hoping that that's the right answer, right? So so that's that. I don't know, any comments on that? If not, there's another question on here.
No, I agree with everything you said. So
sweet.
Right on.
All right. And then John 1:17. So I know you hate these terms. We talk in private. All my life I believe something more akin to the maximum position. You're talking about the papacy maximalist. Is the minimum or minimalist position the true position of the church? I guess it depends on how you define those terms, right? But go ahead, brother.
Yeah. So I know the minimalist stuff. That Elijah and I were talking about this offline yesterday or the day before. In his exposition of what he calls the minimalist position, I agree with everything he says, Elijah. But we both agree we don't like the term. I think it's very unfortunate that it's this minimalist maximalist, because the Catholic position just is what Elijah describes under the banner of the minimalist position.
Right.
I think it's kind of misleading because it makes it sound like, well, the Catholics kind of went over here, but that's refuted, so now they have to retreat back. It's like, no, the tradition, the view all along is what's called as papal minimalism. I think that's an unfortunate label rhetorically, but I agree with the substance. So to answer the question, what's at least with what people should be talking about, what Elijah talks about with the papal minimalist position, that is the Catholic view. Yes. I'm not sure where the minimalist maximalist stuff kind of got popular, but the minimalist is the Catholic view, and it's just a little bit more unfortunate that people kind of carry the wrong connotations with the labels.
Because like you said, it could have the wrong connotation, it could have the wrong meanings, you could have a wrong understanding, and you think you're trying to minimize the papacy, but we're only minimizing it in the context of the maximalists, right? We're not minimizing the papacy in the context of trying to minimize the power of the Pope, right? It's in the context of going against the maximalists. Now, I think you sent me Newman.
Yeah.
And then you sent me that. Did you send me that quote when he quotes
Fessler? Yeah.
Fessler?
Yeah.
And I actually didn't notice that until like later after you sent it. I kind of looked at it again. I was like, wait a minute. He uses the word minimizers because he's being accused of being a minimizer.
Yeah.
But he's really like to your point, he's really just stating the actual teaching of Vatican I. His accusation at the time is that he's a minimizer. Not that he's giving himself that title, but the accusation from the other side, the maximalist, is, oh, Newman, you're a minimizer. You're just trying to minimize it as much as possible, just so you can, appease the Protestants or whatever, right?
Yeah. That's right. And Newman, people get Newman wrong on so many things, but especially on Vatican I. And I think maybe two, his response to Gladstone on the Anglican objections to especially Vatican I, he addresses the Vatican Council and the Vatican definition on papal infallibility, and both of those are worth reading. I think Newman's great; he was brilliant, but those two are just really, really good on the definition and the council itself. I'm laughing at Alan's comments here. Well, first I thought Welton is cool, but it's Welton is Cole. Yeah, I'm not super knowledgeable in all the cool Twitter terms that the kids use these days. I'm 38, so I'm basically a grandpa. But yeah, Cole. I feel like I know what Cole means, and Welton is he's got some serious Cole. Jamila White.
That's James White. That's what he calls James White.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Good. That's great.
Jamila. Yeah.
Any other good questions in here?
And into the questions, so we'll wait maybe a couple minutes, see if anybody else has any questions. But so far,
good comments in there too. Yeah.
Oh yeah. There's some good stuff. I didn't want to pull them up because it would have kind of blocked your article and stuff like that. But Agos Pear,
I've seen him on Twitter. He's got some good stuff.
Yeah.
Agos Pear.
Pare, I think it's Pare. I never know how to say it, but Agos Pare. And yeah, like you said, before it was already acclaimed by the bishops, and that's a good point because the bishops that were at the council, they had already signed off on the tome. So like that actually expands on what you said, and what you said is this is not, hey, I judge, kind of like in a way of I'm judging this tome whether it's right or wrong. It's I'm just putting my name on it to say I agree with it, right? It's an agreement, right? That's a very profound point, and it's nuanced perspective, right? So that little nuance right there changes the whole perspective of how the Eastern Orthodox are trying to make us look at it,
right?
And then you kind of like are shifting it to its proper context, and now this is the proper way of looking at it.
Yeah, no, that's a good comment, and that the Price's translations are an invaluable resource to have. Really, we can have a stream on resources too. We can go through the master list. There's one question here from Nigma 195. Is the consensus acceptance of ecumenical councils seen in the first millennium? I would say no. So there's a lot of coal, to borrow Alan's term, on this issue. People talk about like there's like the pentarchy. So there's the really bad, there's the really cold, the really dark cold, right? This is the pentarchy view. Well, you need the pentarchy, the 5 patriarchs. It's like, well, the patriarchs weren't around as 5 until Chalcedon. That's when you kind of validate Constantinople and Jerusalem. Right. And so before you didn't have, so that means that you didn't have any at the time of Chalcedon to authoritatively to make 5. So you don't have Chalcedon, and you don't have any of the ones before. And if you don't have any of those, including the one that made the 5, then you have no ecumenical councils. So the pentarchy is cool. Then there's the other view. Well, okay, not the pentarchy, the 5 specifically, which came up with Justinian, but you need all the patriarchs, however many there are. That's not true either, because Ephesus was was an authoritative council of the Universal Church, even though one of the patriarchs was holding a robber synod and didn't come around until years later. So that's not true. So there's really no coherent view of consensus that's going to satisfy all of the councils that we both sides acknowledge as universal. So that's the first problem. And so where do you go from there? That's a complicated question. We don't have time to get into it too much here, but I'll say two things. First of all, if one outcome of my Substack series is that people read more of the Catholic Encyclopedia online, then I feel like I'm a big winner, because if you go to the Catholic Encyclopedia, and you go to online, it's all free, newadvent.org, newadvent.org. You can find it in other places too, but on here, and I just go general councils.
One of my favorite articles. I quote from it all the time.
It's so good. And now, I wouldn't say that the Catholic Encyclopedia, because it's older, it's not like it's oh, I just exited out of my tab. My bad.
No, you're good. I can bring it back.
It popped over a new tab that I was looking at, and it.
You're good. You're 38. You're a grandpa.
I know, that's right. I'm a software developer, so I should know, but I actually have never really used the sharing screen on this. What is it, StreamYard? So
you're actually doing better than I did my first time. My first time using this. My show was echoing in perpetuity, so like you can hear an echo, then another echo, then another. And
the infinite feedback loop.
Yeah,
there we go. So my recommendation is, for any topic that you're starting research on, start with the Catholic Encyclopedia. That will probably correct 90% of your errors or your questions. Now, sometimes you'll need to go further and dig deeper, right? With more recent work or whatever. Totally fine, but I say start with this one. The one on general councils is fantastic.
Yeah,
and you'll see where I have really reflected some of the principles that Joseph Wilhelm, who wrote this one back in 1910. I reflect a lot of what he says because it's just so good. If you come in here, you can go to the Pope, Father George. See, my bad. It keeps on popping out a new tab. So instead of closing it, I'm just going to go here. So anyway, the Pope, the one of the Pope is good. Again, these are great starting points. Whenever you want to research something, start with the Catholic Encyclopedia. See what its entry has. If it has one on it, filioque, whatever, make that the starting point of your research.
Yeah.
Let that correct as many things as it can, and then move on from there to other things. But this is such a great resource. But that General Councils one, I really highly recommend for the question of what is a council, what counts as a valid council, what's the relationship of the Pope to the council, and then hang on a second. I switched my cameras. Hold up.
You're good.
Switch back to.
Yeah, when you went on Catholic Encyclopedia and you mentioned Catholic, I was like, I hope he mentions general councils, that article, because that's one of
that's right. Yeah. That's why I love you, Elijah, because this we know the good stuff here. So yeah, this is a good one. There's also let me see if I can grab it real quick. So when you read this article, then buy Father Thomas Crean's book, Vindicating the Filioque, the Church Fathers of the Council of Florence. Obviously, he's looking at the Filioque in the Florentine definition, but he defends the Council of Florence as an authoritative council for everybody. And in the process of doing that, he gets into all of the weeds on what a council is and all the Eastern Orthodox objections to it. It's really good. It's very well sourced. So yeah, buy Father Crean's book, read that as a follow-up to general councils, and then you'll be in a better position to maybe weigh in on some of these issues on consensus, acceptance, first millennium. How does it work? Yeah, this is my answer to that question, if it's helpful.
That's a great answer. It's a great answer. Yeah. I wrote a blog post, and I'm drawing from general council on the question of, and I think the Catholic answer on ecumenical councils is the only one that fits all of the 7 ecumenical councils in first millennium, which is you need the Pope and you need the bishops, head and members. That's it. It's that simple.
Yeah.
It's head and members. It's not like you need 5 patriarchs or 3 patriarchs or all that stuff, or consensus. Every bishop's opinion matters. All that stuff doesn't fit all 7. You can maybe fit 1 or 2, if that, but only the Catholic. And if you read the general councils, it's this idea of headed members that come together, and that's how you get an ecumenical council. That's the only thing that makes sense to fit all 7 ecumenical councils in the first millennium. So we do have another question.
Yeah.
If you want to tackle this one, who has better objections against the papacy, Eastern Orthodoxy or Oriental Orthodoxy?
I don't know that I don't know the difference between the two. I see objections from Protestants, Eastern Orthodox. I don't know where the Orientals. I don't know where a distinctively Oriental objection comes into play.
Right.
I think Alan's tried to make the case at different points that the Oriental Orthodox are more consistent with their ecclesiology, instead of trying to like play both ways until a certain point in time and then breaking off. They kind of like broke off right from the start. So if they're wrong, at least they're consistent. I think that's probably right. But in terms of distinctively Oriental Orthodox objections, I don't know what those would be, other than just the standard objections that Protestants or EOs. So yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I'd have to.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's almost like they all agree on one thing, is that the Pope is not the head of the church and Rome is wrong, right?
Yeah,
they're all united in that sense. But that's a good point from Alan, where the Oriental Orthodox, they rejected the papacy almost outright, kind of, because in 431 Ephesus 1, they did not reject it, and the papal legates made some really strong papal claims, and nobody batted an eye, right, to that.
Yeah.
Right. So let's see. Any other questions? If anybody has any questions, now is the time to do it. But we'd love to do another part. Would you be open to coming back on and doing another part?
Yeah, 2? For sure. No, this is cool. I really appreciate the chance to come in and talk about cool stuff and answer questions. And
sweet.
I learned stuff. I always learn things. You come in here. So yeah, this is great.
Awesome. Thanks, brother. Thanks for coming on. And I learned a lot. Keep writing. I know I have to say that to you, because I know you will. And looking forward to your latest article, which I'm not going to mention, but maybe not your latest one, but one that you're working on.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of them, but I've got one on salvation outside the church that I'm working on. So it's not just Eastern Orthodox stuff, but I've got a bunch of things, and sometimes it's just whatever I have the energy to finish up. That's why you'll see sometimes it's Welton, sometimes it's this, but lots of fun topics these days.
And if you don't mind me asking, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but how many kids do you have?
I have 3. So my oldest is going to be 6 next week. Then I have a 4-year-old and then a 1-year-old. Three girls. So hopefully we have a boy next. But
okay, sweet. Yeah, because
what about you?
So I do have 3. My oldest is going to be 6 at the end of this month.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So
same. Okay.
I have a 3-year-old who's going to be 4 in August, and then I have a 6-month-old. So very similar.
Yeah, very similar. That's awesome, man. And you're a business owner, I've seen. Is that right?
Business owner. Yeah, heating and cooling. So
awesome.
So girl, boy is mine. So you have three girls.
3 girls. Yeah.
Man.
I grew up with all brothers and 1 sister at the very end. 6 brothers and 1 sister. So there were 7 boys and then 1 girl at the end. So I've had to get used to this girl thing, I wrestle them, I throw them around, I treat them like boys. That's what I know. So they're very girly, but they're very tomboyish in a sense of toughness. So
there you go. Yeah. Let me see. Please do a part 2. We will need more of this. Absolutely. And this
Thanks,
style,
I appreciate it.
It fits like the people that are really hungry for this stuff, right? Like the things that you were saying about people that just want a 3-sentence kill shot. This kind of stream, they hate this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. They won't watch more than 2 minutes of this. Yeah. Let's be honest. The people that actually are interested in theology, ecclesiology, God, and are actually want the fullness of truth, and they want to dig deeper, this is the kind of stream for them. This is why my channel is called Underground Catholicism, because dig deeper, underground. And also it's underground. It's not in the sense of mainstream, like Catholic.com, apologetics, which has its place, right? Yeah. Underground Catholicism, kind of like underground hip hop, underground music. It's kind of like it's a gem that goes deeper than your mainstream, like pop, eye candy type of stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, right on, man.
But thanks for being on, brother. I think we're gonna end it here. I don't see any other questions.
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Look forward to the next one.
Absolutely. God bless you, and God bless everybody.
Thanks, y'all. God bless.